Welcome to the Voices of LTCI, presented by the Helper Bees. This is a podcast about the industry that's shaping the way millions of older adults are aging, focusing on stories from those who got us here and those who are carrying us forward. These are the Voices of LTCI.
Hey everybody, I'm Char. I'm CEO of the Helper Bees. This is another episode of Voices of Long-Term Care Insurance. Today I'm really excited to have Jamala Arland with us. She is Senior Vice President who is responsible for Long-Term Care Inforce over at Genworth. Very excited because Genworth is a really important block and Jamala is doing some really fun things. So Jamala, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Char.
Let's start from the beginning. How did you get your start with long-term care insurance? Has it been with Genworth the entire time, or have you sort of hopped around a little bit?
Yeah, I've actually had most of my career at Genworth. I've been at Genworth for just over 18 years, believe it or not. Yeah, and in long-term care only since 2015. So I'd say like in long-term care years, that's a very short lifespan for the industry, but maybe in long-term care years also very short, just given the ups and downs the industry has had. And 2015 was a really important inflection point for Genworth. From a long-term care perspective, we had significantly bolstered reserves to protect claims paying ability at the end of 2014. And having been at Genworth for 18 years in different products and different functions, and really having grown up in my career there, I felt really driven from a purpose perspective to be in the place from a company perspective, from an industry perspective in insurance, where there was a lot of opportunity. And as I had been in different roles, I had a mentor tell me once that as you're building up your skills as a leader, as a business person, try to find opportunities in roles where you can build something, where you can grow something, or where you can fix something. And I felt at that point in Genworth's life cycle, in the cycle for long-term care, there was a significant opportunity to do all three. One, fix some of the issues of the legacy business, but also be a part of the path forward, and contribute to where the industry can go in the future, both from a build perspective, whether it's products, whether it's solutions, and also from a growth perspective as we work towards expanding access to long-term care insurance and solutions to broader markets.
That's great advice. I mean, we're going to get back to that. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into the build, grow, fix. But when you made that transition in 2015 into long-term care, what were some of the surprises that you had? I mean, did you have any preconceived notions going in to long-term care? I certainly did. I thought it would be quite boring and move very slow. Over the last 4 or 5 years, that's proven not to be the case. That even for a big industry, there's a lot of innovation and really interesting things happening, which is the genesis of this podcast. What were some of those preconceived notions that you had, or did you just come in with sort of an open mind in general?
I think one of the things that colored my view of long-term care was also around the same time that it started to become clear from a personal perspective that my grandmother was starting to decline from dementia. So just seeing those signs of her not recognizing people, not knowing what was going on. I got married in 2015, and I was very thankful that she and my grandfather were able to be there. But there were definitely points where, she wasn't the same person that she used to be. And over the last, it was really a 7-year decline that she had. She passed away in 2020. That point, from an industry perspective, in terms of from a personal perspective, seeing the need emerge in my family, really, I guess, solidified how important the business was. From a professional perspective at Genworth, just kind of the environment, there was definitely a critical focus on solutions for long-term care. So I had the personal perspective of this is something that's really important to people, and also the professional perspective of this is also really important to my company that we, create solutions. So that was kind of those were the two things that colored my lens of long-term care. The product, I was in a life insurance role, life valuation, right before coming to long-term care. And working on, looking at the assumptions that drive experience on life insurance. You have mortality and lapse. And then coming over to long-term care, you've got mortality on disabled life, mortality on healthy lives. You got, lapses with or without rate increases. You have situs mix, you have utilization, you have incidence. There were so many factors and so many different assumptions to put together. It is a really complicated business. And I neglected to mention, by background, I am an actuary. So that was, one of the lenses by which I was approaching the business. There are a lot of pieces that come into play for a company to manage as it relates to long-term care, which also means there are the opportunities for solutions at very critical points along the journey. It's not just how do we come up with solutions at the point of claim, but really thinking about pre-claim solutions as it relates to what are the key experience variables and post-claim solutions as well too. So what I did to really get up to speed on long-term care was I started to get involved with the Society of Actuaries and the American Academy of Actuaries and long-term care forums to volunteer and kind of, really get some hands-on exposure. And that's how we met in 2019 that we met through the LTC, through the SOA think tank. So that was really my focus, to try to, get up to speed as much as possible about the industry by not just what was happening in my company, but also understanding the perspective in the broader industry.
Yeah. I think it's such a great story. And I think that's what I love about this industry. It was a big surprise to me, is to see this really strong personal connection to, a family, being a family caregiver, or seeing that struggle play out really directly. And then you have to magnify it to millions of lives in y'all's case, or hundreds of thousands when we start to think about other blocks, and how to take that very small personal connection and solve a very complicated problem, like you were mentioning. Not only is a scale larger, but there's a lot of intricacies. And so for those that like that, the complexity and problem solving, the fixing, it's great because you get to throw all of your mental energy after a complex problem that has real tangible outcomes and real tangible impact. Which leads me to the next question. You started as an actuary, you came out as an actuary, but it seems like a lot of your focus lately has been to taking over a little bit of what I would call more of the operational component side of, like, interacting with policyholders and claimants. How have you made that transition to put a new tool sort of in your toolbox, away from just the actuarial side, and really into the operational aspects?
Yeah, one of the things that I think from the time I started my career as an actuary that was an important connection point for me is, what is the product underlying this business function that I'm responsible for? Whether it's an actuarial modeling process, an actuarial function. And when you start to think about what the product is, what is the solution that your company is offering, then it's very hard not to connect to who is the person that's buying this and what is it that they're trying to protect against or address from a needs perspective. And that's the lens by which I've approached every actuarial job that I've had. So as I made this transition more to a product line leadership, Inforce management perspective, that includes thinking about the solutions, one, to manage risk for the company, but trying to do that in a way that creates, that aligns interest between the company and the policyholder in a way that sometimes felt like it was missing in long-term care. That was one of the things that, when I first, maybe kind of going back to your question about what was surprising, there was this question that I think we've kind of moved away from as an industry of, is long-term care an insurable risk? So with any risk that's insurable, are the incentives aligned between the person who's buying the insurance and the company who's selling it, such that, the person wants to prevent something that the company also wants to prevent, and, there's that margin for profit. In long-term care, you potentially have some of the anti-selection in terms of, I've got this benefit, I'm going to use it or lose it. So do I need to use it efficiently and effectively from a customer perspective, especially if they have very rich benefits? And what are ways that, even if somebody has, a really good amount of insurance, that as an industry, we're aligning with our clients, our policyholders, in a way that those interests still are aligned in terms of benefit usage, efficiency of usage. And I think, in a lot of ways, some of the solutions that you are focused on really kind of highlight some of those things. And I think from an insurance perspective, that's kind of, how we've been thinking about it, a lot at Genworth with our Inforce block. It's not just risk management in and of itself, but it's risk management that helps align interests between the company and the policyholders. And when you're doing that, you're building trust with your policyholders. You're leveraging the interactions that you have with them to continue to offer additional solutions that support them, but also, help manage the risk of the company. And that's the mindset that we've been leveraging, as we've been managing the Inforce. So there's definitely the operations side in terms of, the customer service experience and making sure that you have that good customer service experience, but really thinking about it on that broader scale of what is a solution fundamentally that we're here to support, and making sure that we're driving, that realignment with policyholders. Because as an industry, I think some of the challenges that we've had, whether it's with significant rate increases or other things like that, really can break trust with our policyholders, and really stepping up to say, we're here at the table to rebuild that trust and realign.
Yeah. I mean, that's well said. Exactly, like taking that personal impact that you've felt and how to translate that across scale. Have you seen since 2015, as you've entered this industry and gone into more of the operational and leadership overall, any particular milestone, an event or development that's been impactful for you to inform exactly what you were just talking about, like that ethos of realigning with policyholders, or a win even that you want to celebrate, whether big or small? Like, we've always taken small wins, and those are really illustrative of a lot of hard work. I've seen Genworth do a lot of really interesting things through my career. We were actually introduced to you guys very, very early, and I'm just blown away by a lot of the innovation that was happening inside. But yeah, is there any particular milestone event or development that has been impactful to you since you've sort of hit long-term care insurance?
Thank you for that recognition. I think, as a company, Genworth, it's important for us to be innovative. It's also necessary. And sometimes necessity breeds some of the best solutions and the best partnership and the best opportunities as we work to move the industry forward. Thinking about a memorable moment that I felt kind of was pivotal from a thought perspective. I don't know if you remember, it was back in 2021, the Milken Institute, they had done an innovation lab, and Genworth had been a sponsor, and the result of that was a report that was called New Approaches to Long-Term Care Access to Middle-Income Households. And it was really focused on barriers of the long-term care insurance industry to meet needs of middle income. And the outcome of the innovation lab was 3 potential solutions that could potentially be actioned. Apart from that, what struck me going through the innovation lab, they brought together experts from the long-term care insurance industry, care delivery, but they also had health insurers participate in that innovation lab. And what struck me is how much the similarities are between some of the issues that health insurers may have, faced into, very similar to what long-term care faces, but the ways that they have, many years ahead of the long-term care industry, got in front of some of the issues related to cost management, alignment of risk along the whole kind of, chain, whether it's with the service providers, with the end customers, first with provider networks, then with standardized pricing, wellness initiatives, and more recently, we've seen a lot of the vertical integration and mergers along that line. And in a long-term care space, in some of the industry conference, there's a lot of conversations around wellness. That's definitely by far the biggest tone changer that I think I've been seeing in the last couple of years in long-term care. Thinking about the LTCI conference, when I started going in 2015, there was almost kind of like a lull, maybe a gloom and doom kind of mindset, a lot of the focus around rate actions. And over the last couple of years, there's almost been a positivity and energy around solutions like wellness, solutions in the space of insurtech that can help companies, but also help the populations that we serve. And I think in many ways, that's the trajectory that the health insurance industry has been on for many years ahead of us. And there's a lot, I think, that we can learn from health insurers in the way that they have integrated, the product, the insurance, the service delivery, and also kind of from a pricing and a cost management perspective.
I mean, that's an exact theme that I think we're going to start hearing more in long-term care insurance. You guys were before your time. If you guys were talking about it, several years ago, I was just at a Society of Actuaries conference. It was a health conference, so it might be a little bit biased, but that was exactly on my panel. Our audience, we had a really nice interactive discussion around that exact concept, where you have quite a few of those in the health plan world, either on the Medicaid side or Medicare Advantage or the Medicare side, who are doing very innovative things, who are doing vertical integration. And we talked quite a bit about like owning the entire value chain and how you just can't do it alone. And long-term care insurance sort of has been off to the side, a few decades behind, but is starting to look over and say, look at all of the great things from risk stratification to population health to wellness programs. And we're starting to learn very rapidly, I think, how to adopt some of the things. Again, health insurance has a little bit of a different focus than our focus, but they're not so different that we can't learn from each other. And I think that exact conversation is happening more frequently than I've seen it, frankly, ever. But
I think it's an important conversation. And as the conversation evolves, and I really hope that it does, I'm on the California task force to establish the public long-term care insurance program there. And as more and more states are having these conversations and hopefully bringing online solutions that brings access to long-term care supports and services to broader populations, and the way that California is doing it with a very, very much with a focus on having the public-private partnership be a key part, that in many ways kind of helps broaden the access and awareness of long-term care insurance, such that the platform that insurance may have on a long-term care basis may start to look more like how health insurance does, as you kind of have more of those state kind of federal private type solutions working together and becoming more integrated, and also having the providers be more integrated into those solutions as well too. I feel like, kind of like you said, building up, the whole value system in the ecosystem, could be an opportunity, especially as the conversations evolve at a state and federal level too.
That's really interesting. Going back to one of your first comments, how do you think this integration with public and private, not only health insurance now, but long-term care insurance, how do the policyholders respond to that? Do you think that they'll respond favorably to it, that somebody's bringing together all of these fragmented payer sources and who do I go to what? Or do you find it like more insurance involvement or somewhere even in between?
When I think about my personal experience, like that I shared with my grandmother, I had tried to help my grandfather, I say tried, get home care support for her. He was her main caregiver. They, like myself, were immigrants to the U.S. and they actually immigrated here after they retired. So all their kind of social security supports were from the UK, where they had their careers. So whereas they had a good nest egg to rely on, they did not have a long-term care insurance solution. And so we had done some interviews with different home care providers, and there was a resistance in my grandfather to get help, not because he didn't need it, but he felt, this is something that I need to do myself. I think from an education perspective, allowing people, caregivers, to be able to say it's okay to get help is something that's really important, I think, especially in immigrant populations, to get those supports. And for someone like my grandfather who is retired, he wasn't like he was giving up an income or something. But in a lot of immigrant households, especially, that burden can rest on an adult daughter, usually an adult child. And that may mean they are giving up a job to take care of an aging parent, which could cause a lot of additional strain in the household. the way that California, for example, I talk about California because, again, I'm on that task force. California is approaching it in a culturally competent way. So how can we be really mindful of, the population in the state, and the immigrant population is significant in California. But you think about that from a broader perspective, right? Across America, the need for long-term care and supports is evident. There's no question about that. People need help. A lot of people are doing it on their own. There's a significant unpaid caregiver kind of market that exists. And if we, both from a private perspective and a government perspective, give people permission to get help, give them the supports to get that help, and give them ways to ensure and protect themselves in different ways. So not just solutions for the person needing care, but solutions for caregivers as well too. I think that the response will be very positive. Initially, when you kind of have the conversation about the insurance idea, there is the concept, who's paying for it? Is the state paying for it? Do I have to pay for it from a payroll tax? But I think we talk about the value proposition of what these types of solutions can do and provide for people. I think the response will be positive because, one of the surveys that California had done, a significant portion of Californians felt like they did not have, the resources to address their care needs in the future or to be able to pay for care in the future. So there's definitely the need. And if you tie that with the education in terms of how these types of supports can help, I think that the response will be very favorable.
Yeah. Well said. We see that in a small way. We do quite a bit of some of our work is dealing with policyholders, either pre-claims or on-claims, what our industry calls wellness initiatives. It's interesting on the on-claim side where you tend to, the first few interactions when we start a new program are really meant to just dispel myths. We talk a lot about a trust deficit. We can hear on the other side of the phone a little bit of, well, what's the catch? And I think once you get over that, because people want you actually to get over that, and it just takes a little bit of persistence on both the carrier and our end, just through a lot of phone calls, a lot of communication to build that trust. Then the floodgates tend to open, and then they're really able to talk about their challenges and then get into the solutions. And so I think you're right. I think policyholders, humans, want the help, right? Need the help and the guidance. It's such a complicated industry to navigate, not only on the long-term care side, but which provider do I go to and what order do I go select that provider? Does Medicare cover it? What does Medicare cover? Navigating all of these different insurance aspects while dealing with all the emotional stresses of just aging in general is too much. And I think that's where having a long-term care insurer coming in, we've had a huge opportunity to build a tremendous amount of trust with the policyholder and their surrounding family and their unpaid caregiver network and their neighbors to show that, no, we understand this. We've seen this now a couple 100,000 times. And we, from the data, we know some of the things that work really well and some maybe that don't, and guiding them sort of to the ultimate outcome. I think you're right. I think we're going to see just a reversal of that distrust of carriers in general, if it ever existed.
Right. That's exactly right. And you talked about the operational aspect, and what you just said just now, really about the multiple conversations to help build trust for people to understand. And then you see, the floodgates open in terms of them being willing to share and being willing to open up about their needs and allow that help to happen. That facilitates the help. That's a really important balance, I think, from an insurance industry perspective of really having that focus. And that's something that we do at Genworth, that focus on high touch customer service, especially at the point of claim, at that key moment in our policyholders' journey, really having those high touch conversations and repeat conversations and, trying to meet them where they are. And there's that balance from, a cost perspective as we think about how do we balance automation and artificial intelligence in our operations processes. And it's that fine line of balance of kind of where's the right spaces to do those things, because there certainly are places to automate, but the customer contact is one that we found is just really important and just really matters a lot.
That's what I've been impressed with behind the curtains, and we've worked with you guys and small capacities, like I mentioned early on, just being introduced to someone on your team, and then later as we start building up our capabilities. It's easy to think Genworth. I mean, it's a huge, massive block. Might be impersonal, but when I got to meet a lot of the folks that are working on this problem, I mean, they're really smart. I think what's happening is the scale actually pushes them to have to think of very clever solutions that can scale quickly, but almost to an individual, they brought that personalization too. Like when we've worked on implementing programs, even talking to call center folks, I mean, there's a lot of focus around how do we make this communication a positive experience for the policyholder, even though they're probably calling us for not a fun thing, right? It's
exactly
right. It's probably a depressing or distressing, at the least, event why they're reaching out. I've just been blown away from everyone, from again, people directly interacting with claimants. They're just really focused on how do we make this into something good.
That's right. And one of the things that we focused on, especially really in the last year, was just highlighting the experiences that our employees have. Many of our employees are caregivers themselves. And, and especially when you think about somebody who is on the phone with our customer, we've been encouraging our employees to really lean into the experiences that they have had personally with caregiving. Everybody's got a caregiving story in some way, whether it's a grandparent, a parent, or a caregiving concern that they are, looking at on the horizon. And that really allows them to tap into empathy as they're engaging with our policyholders. And, as we've been, continuing to manage our Inforce block and look for the opportunities for growth in the future, that's kind of how we're transitioning that and translating that into the types of solutions that Care Scout's focused on.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back a little bit to something that you covered before. Like you said, you had some great advice from a mentor. You work on something that you'll either build, grow, or fix. Anything else that you want to that's been really impactful to you? We have a lot of listeners who see you and see sort of the breadth of now what you own, and are very curious of like, how did you get there? What are the lessons that you picked up along the way that have served you well? What are the ones that maybe haven't? Any sort of words of wisdom to impart on others?
Yeah, we just talked about empathy and kind of leveraging your experiences as you're bringing that to your professional development and into the solutions that you're driving. And I think that's something that I continue to lean on. So my experiences as, an immigrant to the U.S., my experiences as a woman, my experiences as a woman of color, and how my unique perspective and voice can help drive the solutions for the future. From a leadership perspective, in many ways, I've been lucky. Every manager that I've had has turned into a mentor, and has left me with, a really good nugget of, oh, I want to do that thing like that person. So it's kind of finding the people that you look up to and that you aspire to be like, and what are the things that they're doing that you feel can be authentic to your style and your natural personality, to add to your toolbox of skills. And lastly, in terms of leading a team and driving a solution, one of the things that I think about a lot, and I ask myself a lot every day, almost every day, is why are people following me? Why is my team following me? What am I doing? What am I inspiring? What am I driving? What vision am I setting for the future that makes them excited about following? But also, what are the things that I'm doing? How am I behaving? How am I showing up? That also, creates that space, for people to trust the things that I'm saying, and kind of come along. And it really comes down to like, being in this industry, I'm excited about the opportunities that we have. So when I talk about it, it's real. It's what I feel. It's not just what I'm doing because, that's my job, but it's my job because I enjoy what we're doing and the opportunities that we have in this industry.
It reminds me, I just pulled up a quote somebody, our director of marketing, sent me this past week. It's almost exactly what you're talking about, where it says leadership is voluntary, and it's the act of showing up and saying, hey, I'm going over here. Who wants to come? It's something I think about a lot as well, right? We've grown rapidly to having no money, working in one of our co-founders' house. We couldn't even afford that mortgage, so we had to split it with another startup to 10xing our size. And I'm always fascinated with why do people want to go on that journey, right? It's hard, it's unknown, it's risky. And I just wrote about it with the company just this past week, which is it's a choice who you work with, especially in this environment where labor market's really strong. The power has been returned back to, in a large part, to the employees. And so every day that an employee chooses you to work and follows your mission, I mean, I think it's a blessing. And I think as a leader, you have to understand that it's voluntary, that they're choosing to do this. And sometimes it's scary querying why, like, why are you doing this? You're not doubting. It's just trying to understand what is the ethos that your employees, your team members, your peers are all buying into, and how has that culture changed over time? So I think that phenomenal words of wisdom at a large company and at a small one like ours.
Yeah, I love that quote, and I love kind of the parallels that you made between our companies, and it's been amazing to watch your company grow over the last few years as well too. Like there's a lot of room in this industry, and there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of upside, and we got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, yeah, that's a perfect segue. So my last question for you is, like, how do you view that a lot of work to do? There's a lot of opportunity. How do you view the evolution? You generally pretty positive of like where we're heading. You mentioned sort of the pallor in 2015 that the industry faced. Now we're talking about really exciting things, I think, around wellness and trying to really help our policyholders. But there's still a lot of challenges that you mentioned. There's a significant many hurdles that we have to clear. What is, from where you sit, the perspective that you have? How do you think about the future of our industry over the next 5 and 10 years?
Yeah, I think about maybe three categories of things that are really important going forward, and not necessarily in any particular order. When we think about access to long-term care services and supports, long-term care insurance, how does this industry grow going forward? I think the collaborations of working with state and federal government on solutions to expand access to long-term care through collaboration, through public-private partnerships, is an important lever that we need. We need to find the solution to make that really something that's tangible, that creates not just the access, but also the opportunity for, the continued growth of the long-term care insurance industry, kind of, from the recessions that we had seen in terms of insurance over the last, say, decade or so. So how can we kind of reverse that trend, leveraging kind of the momentum that's being built at the state and federal level from the first perspective? I think the second thing that we hit on is that balance between high touch service, artificial intelligence, AI. How do we balance those things? There's lots of conversations about artificial intelligence, ChatGPT. Would you have ChatGPT talk to your long-term care insurance policyholder at the point where they're calling in for claim? That's not something that we're advocating at Genworth, but it has to be a question that we ask ourselves. How do these type of generative AI and other types of technology come into play in the future? What are the right ways to use that, but still not losing sight of the fact that this is a very human experience that our policyholders are facing, and striking that right balance, because there's elements of cost that we need to consider, but also not losing the empathy in the work that we're doing as we're entering that space. And then, from kind of that empathy perspective, continuing to take it to the next level and continue to drive the conversations forward in terms of wellness and services. And even also thinking about the caregiver as a customer or a potential customer, for the future. I think the opportunities in wellness are huge. I think there's a lot of proof points that we still need to, solidify. But it's not the same wellness that you may think of in a traditional sense, or maybe, kind of going back to the healthcare examples, maybe where they started with like gym memberships and things like that. We're being very focused and intentional about where we're creating interventions and solutions. And I think those proof points will come, but starting to see them come will be an important kind of next inflection point for the industry in terms of how wellness and services become integrated in how we think about, traditional long-term care insurance and the solutions that we're offering, which is why I'm really excited about, the opportunities that Genworth has with our CareScout affiliate. So I think that those are three ways or three places of important focus and opportunity for the industry going forward: the public-private partnerships, how we leverage AI without losing our humanity and the empathy in the services that we're providing, and how we're continuing to build on the service offerings that we have.
Yeah. It's a good point around the early days of wellness, and something that I think it's really important from a messaging perspective for our industry to understand. It's exciting time with a lot of innovation, but it's so early. And you alluded to this. Yes, healthcare has done a lot of interesting things, but it's a little bit different. It's not gym memberships necessarily, right? It's looking at advanced care planning and home modification. It's a different spectrum. One of my fears, I'm very bullish about the industry as a whole, but one of my fears is that there might be some early setbacks, because of course there will be, right? We're not going to get it perfect right out of the gate, but we know that this is the right answer. We know that innovating to find the right protocols, to find the right targeting of other providers out there in what order is the way that we're going to align ourselves or realign ourselves, as you had put it, with the policyholder. And if we take a step back, that's fine. We take that, I hope we as an industry take that as a learning experience, figure out how to iterate really well, and then continue. And so it'll just take executives like you to have that patience and that fortitude to say, we are doing the right thing. And something else that you mentioned that does not get said enough, which is wellness is great and it's buzzy and it's exciting, but understanding all the touch points of the policyholder, from maybe, again, you're not using ChatGPT, but from the call, the first call that the policyholder places to the eventual wellness provider program that CareScout might provide, all of those touch points are important. And I think there's a really important lesson that you just said I want everybody to make sure they understand, which is every interaction is critical. It's not just on the wellness side. We have to understand that every touch point that we have, either whether we use technology or we just bring empathy into the equation, is an important factor of driving whatever outcome we want downstream.
That's exactly right. Thank you for restating it that way, because it just made me think about a touch point that is by all means a negative touch point. That's a significant part of Genworth's risk management strategy is the rate action touch point. Mm-hmm. And that's a touch point that we've been trying to, and I think successfully transitioning from a clear negative, you're getting a rate increase, to a touch point where we can be engaging and re-engaging with the policyholder on solutions that balance that full spectrum of what's going on with them, since we had that initial touch point of underwriting the policy, and just re-engaging with our policyholder and getting to know what's been going on with you, really understanding the evolution, because traditionally insurance, you sell a product and it kind of sits there until the person calls you and makes a claim. And I think there's a lot of onus in the long-term care industry to be proactive in re-engaging with our policyholders before they call in to make that claim.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the fundamental big changes that we've seen is that proactiveness, and it's the smart people like you bringing that empathy, bringing that strategic mindset, a love for data and love for numbers, but understanding that we have to be proactive about it. If we're reactive, we've been reactive too long, essentially. And being proactive is a way that we can make significant strides of earning trust back, as well as making a very large impact with how older adults and their caregivers within the entire country sort of approach not only our industry, but just approach their own care journey. Because we're all getting older. We'll all, if we're lucky enough, go through that exact same journey.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolute treat for me. Thank you so much for being here on the episode. More importantly, I really want to thank you for your thought leadership just throughout the years, and for everything that you're going to do. And perhaps more importantly, I felt it on this, and I hope everybody else will, just the general authenticity that you bring to everything that you're doing. So thank you, Jamala. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed talking to you.